about if a particularist gives some kind of answer to this question that has a result that they actually aren't happy with, that they can just adjust that result. They can just say, oh, actually, you know what, I do think that being is valid.
That's kind of like a metaphor, right? The key point is, right,
Well,
you've got a
can you tell me if
listener.
I just want to understand if what I just said was accurate? Like, is the idea that if
No,
okay, well then I'm not sure what you're trying to say exactly.
let me try reframing the issue in a way that will resolve that part, right? So you could think about it this way: you've got a listener who's a particularist who um, uh, eats cows but doesn't eat humans, and you've got a person on display, right, who's being interrogated, who also is a particularist who eats cows and um, doesn't eat human beings, right? Now, then the person who's being interrogated, right, is given this kind of inventory, right, um, in which he's given all these examples and asked which ones would be eatable and which ones wouldn't, right? Now, the listener can look at that set and say, well, he's got lots of examples that are unintuitive to me, where if I were asked, I wouldn't have put them in the eatable category, I would have put them in the uneatable category, or vice versa. But he's not actually changing anything,
Okay.
right? He's just noticing that the interlocutor, right, just has inverse values from him when it comes to specific examples.
How's
So
that any? I just
there's
don't understand
nothing.
how that's different than what happens with a generalist who's listening, though. A generalist can listen and just hear their set of things that they agree with or don't agree with and go, oh, like, I agree or I don't agree. Like, what's the difference there, whether it's a particularist or a generalist listening?
People keep bringing up force of the argument here, and the force against the generalist is actually present because it's very difficult to find principles that you want for one case that'll work for all cases. Whereas with a
Exactly.
particularist, it's not very difficult to just throw in whatever seems intuitive.
So the idea is, well, I'm just trying to understand with the example that Jack just gave. So there's someone who's listening, and they're a generalist or they're a particularist, and they hear some kind of position coming from the person who's having named the trait run on them that they don't agree with. I don't understand why that's any different for like a particularist or a generalist. Like anyone could be listening and go, I agree or I don't agree.
Well, I think Tofi gave the answer. It's possible, right, that somebody could give a principle which the other person would agree with down the line, right, when you ran the trade equalization process, right? But given that it's so difficult to find a principle that will cover all the intuitive and unintuitive cases, right, it's very easy to construct a reductio that will persuade most of these so-called listeners, right, that there's a problem with the principle being offered, right? But
Yeah.
see, it's not actually interesting, right, for the person to learn if the other person is a particularist that they have these unintuitive cases, right? Because they're going to expect that, given that they're particularists, right, that they're just going to have different particulars from the other person. So when they start disclosing the unintuitive cases, right, it doesn't actually move them to revise their position because they're not seeing any problem. They're just seeing somebody who has different values.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with that. So you could have a particularist listening who currently thinks it's fine to eat animals and not fine to eat humans, and they notice the kinds of evaluations that their fellow particularist is making about the beings in the trait equalization process. They're unhappy with them. They try to reflect for themselves on which beings have and don't have value, and then they realize that they're having a hard time doing so, and they start questioning whether animals actually have value or not, right? So that can happen just as well if you're dealing with a particularist.
But I don't think any of us are denying that it can.
Yeah, I mean, then I don't get it. Like, is the assertion that like that's some like minority of particularists who that would be the case for?
Well,
There's no
I mean,
rational motivation.
yeah, that's
Well, rational motivation. What do we even like? Wait, okay. I don't want to get way off in the weeds on whatever is meant by that. So, all I want to say is that the whole idea is you run this dialogue process. The person starts spelling out what their system actually says, and then listeners, particularist or not, will reflect on those answers and hopefully be prompted to think about veganism, right? So that's the whole idea. I don't understand unless we're saying that like particularists tend to have like radically different views on what's acceptable or not than generalists. I don't know why we'd expect some like big difference in how they're affected.
Because suppose somebody has strong reasons to suppose particularism is true, and they come to see that some other particularist has unintuitive beliefs. They're just going to say, well, there's no problem with particularism. We have very good reasons to suppose it's true. So I'm just going to say, let's just take these other intuitive things. They're not going to just say, well, let's
Right,
consider
they could do
that
that,
veganism
or
is actually.
they could do that, or they could end up thinking, well, like where do I draw these lines, and is there actually a good answer, and then reflecting on whether they ultimately even agree with carnism, right? So
Well, we think
Well, it's
the
not
good
really-
answer is
well,
just
one-
yeah,
one
the good
second,
answer is just all the things they want.
One second. So it seems like you're saying that a given person could just kind of like ad hoc alter their view so it doesn't have the consequence, and you're saying
no, they're not altered.
The person listening is not altering their view.
That's right.
I thought we were saying that, they just have an unspecified view, and then they specify that, like that's the case.
Yeah,
Right.
that
But
person.
sorry, what
exactly,
I mean,
that person-
yeah. So I'm including moving from uncertainty to certainty as like altering a view. So if the idea, so the whole idea is you run this process, people hear the argument, and then they're going to reflect and see if they think the idea is that they're going to reflect on that process and then consider like, do I think the beings in this process have value? Which ones do, which ones don't, and maybe ultimately make their way to like, well, do I even think do I really agree that animals shouldn't have value? And it can be a particularist or a generalist who hears the argument and has that kind of reaction, or it could be a particularist or a generalist who hears the argument and has the reaction of, well, I'm just going to like alter my position. You know what I mean by alter, such that it doesn't have that consequence, right? So if the idea is just that it's easier for a particularist to do like the altering part, then like, yeah, I mean, that seems fine. It seems easier to just say, oh, I just changed my judgment about this situation, than like I build a new principle set. But unless you think that particularists and generalists have like radically different views about what is right, I don't know why we'd expect it to necessarily be like more effective for generalists.
It's not a question of necessarily, right? The point is simply that obviously it's fundamentally just going to be an empirical question, right? Whether the methodology has a better outcome for veganism than for some rival view, right? But the point is that it seems like if somebody is a particularist, right, it offers them a very easy way to avoid the uncomfortable consequences that most generalists are going to be up against when they're confronted with these kinds of thought experiments.
Yeah, well,
right?
I think that's just like generally true for particularists. Like, I think that a particularist, like anytime, one second, anytime that you're shown some kind of conclusion that seems unpalatable to you or to others about your moral view, if you want to get rid of it, you can always just say, well, no, my evaluation is actually like, yeah, that situation's fine, right? You can kind of like.
Well, they're not doing that though. Right. The point is.
Well, I thought they were moving from
saying,
an unspecified, from uncertainty to.
They might say, okay, I don't know which. I've never inventoried all the examples, so I don't know in advance which ones are going to be acceptable and which aren't. Right. But the point is that it seems like, given that when you start asking that question, right, they can just classify according to their intuitions, right? The question is, why would we expect that what's more likely, right, is that their intuitions are going to fall in such a way that more vegans are going to be produced, then people are going to actually solidify their reasons for continuing to eat meat.
So I guess I want to get to the core of this. So let's see what we agree on. So we agree that you can just run this dialogue process. People are going to produce their answers to it, and then those who are watching are going to either be prompted to reflect or not, right? Like, we can agree on that much?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then are we going further and saying that a particularist who's listening is like far less likely to reflect on their views than a generalist?
Well, we're saying that it's far less likely that the types of considerations that that will cause discomfort to most generalists, right, would arise in their case, right? Because anytime a case seems uncomfortable, they will just say, well, given that that case makes me uncomfortable, I would just place that in the uneatable category, right? If I were given that, right?
They could do that, or they could be prompted to reflect on their view. So what I'm trying to understand,
we're not.
What I'm just trying to understand is what exactly, like, what is the criticism supposed to be? Like, what is it that you are saying is like bad or something here?
Well, it just seems like it's very possible that the strategy might actually be contrary to your goal.
Why would you expect that it would be contrary to my goals? I mean, that's not the...
Because I assume your goal would be to convince more people vegans.
Yeah, I think that would be good. So,
but there's no real reason to suppose that'll happen with this.
To suppose that it would persuade more people to go vegan than not to go vegan?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can just kind of like appeal to, my experience in actually using the argument. Like, most people aren't able to generate a good answer to it. A lot of people do go vegan from hearing it, but we don't have some kind of like statistics.
When we say more people, we mean particularists here. Like, I think, yeah, you're usually talking to people who aren't very familiar and are just kind of taking for granted this principled approach.
Yeah, so, well, wait, so are you granting that for a large number of people, this is likely to skew in the direction of veganism when you say that? Because particularists are presumably, like, a minority, right?
I'm saying usually the people you're talking to might just have generalist leaning, or whether they do or not, like they just take for granted without realizing.
Okay, so I guess I'm still just where I'm at now is I'm just trying to understand like what the objection is supposed to be. So the objection is supposed to be it's supposed to be what exactly?
The objection is just that it doesn't have force against the particulars where it has against the generalists.
Well, wait, I mean force, I just take that to mean that like it's forceful if it causes them to reflect on their views.
Well, it's not just that it reflects on their views. It has to have the outcome that you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, like, reflecting on their views, and, like, the goal there is that if they reflect on those views, it'll go in the direction of veganism. So, I don't see a reason to think that, a particularist will hear the kind of answers that are given to these questions, and then, and then skew less in the direction of veganism than a generalist. Like, I would just kind of make the same induction for, like, any person. Like, if I just see how most people react to the argument, I would assume that it would probably be the same general thing for particularists. They hear the examples, they probably have some kind of similar reaction to the general population about which beings there have value and which don't, and then they are probably as likely as anyone else to reflect on their position and alter it to veganism at that point.
I don't think that's. I think the particularist is more likely to just say, "Well, I want to keep eating meat."
Why? What's the reason for that? It seems like you're assuming that particularists are just going to are like less willing to reflect on their values or something.
No, because they're going to reflect on their values, but then they're just going to say, "Well, I just take X, Y. I was just
Well, why
say
are,
the
why are
list
you
is
They're going to
assuming
look
that,
at
though?
the person you. They're going to look at the person you've interrogated and say, "Oh, well, the fact that he has unusual intuitions by my lights when it comes to certain examples, or
Are what? Certain examples.
issue, because I just don't put those people in. I don't
Right,
put
like
those
it,
creatures
Well,
in that
it
set.
sounds
if it
like
doesn't pose any
one
problem
second.
for
Come
their
on, I don't
particularism,
want to
why would
get
they change their
I don't
particularism?
want to get like gang attacked by a fucking group of people. Let's just take our time. So, a I don't know why you would think it would be the case that a particularist would hear the kind of answers that are given to these types of questions and then be any less likely to reflect on their overall moral decision about being a non-vegan than a generalist would.
Well, we've explained that.
Because it doesn't
Okay, well,
it doesn't do anything.
Pardon?
If the argument doesn't do anything to harm particularism, why would they?
Why would the argument
like
do something to harm particularism?
because
Where are you
if it
bringing
does
that in?
if it doesn't give them some reason to suppose generalism, like what? Why would it be? Why would
they
they
even
just suddenly become vegan? Why would they not just say,
wait a
"Well,
second.
I just intuitively think that all these beings are
Wait a second.
edible"?
Wait a second. What do you mean assume generalism? Why is generalism possibly coming into this, right? So the argument is not designed to make someone think, "Oh, I should become a generalist." That's just like it's not even related. I don't know how you would get to something like that. The idea is just I mean, again, I think I'm just repeating myself, so, like, I'm not sure, like, maybe it's just not, like, getting through, but I think I've been pretty clear. So, someone hears this, right, they hear the dialogue flow process, and then they hear the examples that are given, and then those examples very likely strike them as unintuitive, they reflect on their view, right, and then I don't see why we'd think that a particularist is any less likely to reflect and go vegan than a generalist would be.
Well,
What would be the motivation? What
Well,
would be the motivation for the particulars to just randomly go vegan? Why not just say, well, I think that these...
Well, they could have, well, let me answer. They could have the exact same kind of reaction that a generalist has. Well, I mean, the generally same reaction, where they could hear those cases, and they could go, well, you know, I don't feel too good about those cases. Let me, like, think this problem through. Like, where exactly do I think, what kind of beings do I think have value in here or not? They could start going through it in their head, right? And they could start being like, you know, I'm actually struggling with this. Like, I don't know if I can generate answers here that make me too happy. And then they can be like, well, I mean, what about the question in the first place of if I even think it's okay to kill animals, right? So it seems like they could just as easily make their way there as a generalist could. What is wrong with the account that I just gave? What's the problem with that?
I don't see the thought process that would be going on in the particular head, but that
well, I'm gonna
that
say
would
what
make them
I'm
not-
gonna
that
say
would-
what you and Jack just said to me, which is it's been explained to you. I mean, I just walked you through it, right? So the thought process could be, for example, well, all of those the way that this person just categorized these creatures seemed very unintuitive to me. Let me think about this. How might I categorize them? I'm actually struggling to even find what kind of beings in here have value and what kind of beings don't.
We're not saying that it's not possible for that to happen, right? It's like easy to say it's logically possible that this could be the outcome, right? That's not the issue.
Right, but I'm asking you why you think that that would be less likely to happen with a particularist than a generalist.
Why would we?
Why would you what?
Why would
Duncan,
we
can you
think
mute your mic? You're going off. Why would we think what?
that they would find it in?
You're breaking up. Why would we think that? Sorry, it's fine. Why would we think that they would find it what?
Find it uncomfortable that another particularist itemizes or inventories, let's say, the individual examples, right, in a different way than they would inventory.
Okay, sorry. The question is, why would they find it, the fact that another particularist inventories the examples differently than them? Why would they find that what?
Why would they find that in some way
And it's your mic. A what?
an uncomfortable truth to learn?
Well, the idea. Why would they find it uncomfortable? Well, because they have different values.
No, but the point is, they would expect at the outset that the itemization would be different from their particulars.
Sure, but when they hear the specific itemization, they might go, well, Wait, some of those seem, now that I actually think about the kind of beings that are in here, some of this seems really weird to me, right? What kind of classification would I engage in here, right? So the idea, again, like, it seems like we're going in circles, because it seems like I'm giving you the account of, like, what the argument does, how a particularist could react to it, and I'm just not understanding, like, are you just objecting and saying a particularist isn't likely to do that?
Well, it doesn't seem to be likely.
Why would you think that? Why
Because
would you?
it seems so easy to imagine the particularist to just say, "Oh well, I just don't put those examples."
So your claim is basically that. So let me just make sure I understand. You think the argument could be effective for generalists, the argument could be effective for particularists, but because it's easier for particularists to find their way to a position that makes sense, there's like a lower chance of this dialogue process causing a particularist to reflect on their views and change them.
Well, it seems
It seems what?
it doesn't really seem like there's any likelihood that they should change their views at all.
Well, that's
right?
well, wait. Any likelihood? That seems like a strange claim. Like, it seems like you're like entering people's minds or something. Like, a lot of people are going to react by hearing the kind of view that's put forward and going, well, I certainly don't align with that. What kind of answer do I want to generate? And then at that point, they're thinking about the question.
Yeah,
but they're not going to change their view.
Yeah, they're not going to be like, oh, the outcome of this process is, it turns out that as I go through the inventory, right, every intermediate example goes in.
Every intermediate example goes what?
In one or the other category. Like that whole set of intermediate examples gets lumped into one or the other.
The idea is just that a particularist is not likely to hear the dialogue process and reflect on their view. Is that what the criticism is supposed to be?
No, they might reflect on their...
Duncan, can you please stop? I just want to talk to one person at a time. Thank you.
No, actually, go ahead, Tofi, because I'm having problems with the app, so it's probably better if he does.